both watched Fooly Cooly when we were kids.
It was a formative experience for both of us, opening the door to a wonderfully weird world of animation that we'd only seen glimpses of up until that point.
Now, 15 years after its original US broadcast, the series that nurtured our love of anime is coming back.
So, we decided to sit down and take a fresh look at it, and this is the result.
This is Fooly Cooly Rewind.
Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 2 of Fooly Cooly Rewind. Today we are going to be discussing episodes 3 and 4 of the original Fooly Cooly series. First up, we are discussing episode 3, Marquis de Carabas. My name is Mark.
And I'm Patrick.
The title of this episode is referring to a character from the play Puss in Boots, who is a fictional... the character that's referring to is a fictional nobleman that the main character in the play, the cat, makes up in order to earn wealth from delivering gifts to the king. And that is by no coincidence, because Puss in Boots is the play that the kids are performing in this episode. It was directed by Shoji Saeki, who directed episodes of Gurren Lagann, His and Her Circumstances, and Strike Witches. But you would probably better know him as the director of Medaka Box, This Ugly Yet Beautiful World, and Wish on the Pleiades, everybody's favorite Subaru-themed magical girl series.
Yeah, so basically the guy that directed the stuff post-Trigger and
yes,
post-Car.
And then animation direction was handled by Tadashi Hiramatsu again. We spoke about him in the last episode. He AD'd on one of those episodes as well, but he's the Yuri on Ice character designer. If you need to know more about him, you can listen to the previous episode, which hopefully you have done already, because this would be weird if you didn't. But episode 3 in a lot of ways is definitely Eri Ninamori's episode. Eri Ninamori is a tertiary character in the show. Normally, she is one of Naota's friends. She is the student council president at his school and just is kind of a fellow classmate.
Yeah, she's one of the three kids that are like constantly in the background.
Yeah. And also it is revealed in this opening scene, which is a scene that I had coincidentally also completely forgotten about until this rewatch, to be the daughter of Mabase, their city that they live in's mayor. And it is revealed very early on that the mayor is embroiled in a big scandal because he's been adulterous with his secretary, and that's kind of what this scene is dedicated to doing. And the other thing that this scene is dedicated to showing, I should say, is that Eri Ninamori is kind of a busybody and kind of is orchestrating a lot of this stuff behind the scenes and knows a lot more than she lets on.
Yeah, and it lets you know that in a pretty fun way, because she comes off as kind of precocious and bratty as she immediately starts verbally assaulting the secretary, letting her know that she knows exactly what's going on. You can't hide it.
Yeah, and in fact, she has a quote where she says, "You slept over last night, but you put on a new suit this morning." Basically saying, you guys can do whatever you like to hide this from me, but it's not going to happen. She knows a lot more, definitely, that she lets on. This episode might be the most screenshotted episode of the show. Just the most still images I've ever seen of Fooly Cooly online, I think, have come from this episode. Specifically relating to fashion. This episode's fashion is incredibly on point. Naota's freaking Gilligan's Island bucket hat is amazing. It's
kind of like the friggin' streetwear subreddit.
It is,
but in 90s.
And a lot of those looks are shockingly timeless. Haruko's
super popular.
I really like Haruko's mechanic outfit at the beginning with the pinstripe turtleneck and the overalls, and of course Ninamori's iconic USSR sweater, which exists for no reason other than
literally just a red sweater that says USSR on it.
It's amazing. It is.
It's something she would wear.
I wrote it is such a heckin' look, but it is definitely a heckin' look, like most of this episode is. I have some notes on it later, but this episode also does not look like the previous two episodes at all.
It struck me, one of the notes I wrote while watching it is that this episode is super cartoony.
Yeah.
More than any, which kind of cracks me up, because I I like a minute after I had that thought, they actually had a throwaway line about Tom and Jerry and Doraemon.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, they know.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
I rewatched this episode today just to make sure I was getting everything, and Mamimi is like playing with Naota's cat ears, who he has throughout he has throughout the entire show, throughout this entire episode. And she says, "Oh, Naoto, you're like Doraemon," and he's like, "But Doraemon doesn't have any ears."
Yeah,
which is great.
That is good.
Another fantastic thing that we definitely referenced in our first Fully Cooley video that we did was the famous Crystal Pepsi Cheerio localization line, which happens a couple of moments after Naota arrives at school in the episode. And they're talking about I think a zine. I think his dad's
there's
zine.
a short name for magazine zine.
Yeah,
I think in this context, zine is just like a self-published magazine because you see him in the episode trying to sell it.
Well, I mean, a zine literally is a self-published magazine, so it makes sense. But I don't think the concept of zines exists in the same way.
Not really.
But it is again a great example of
Japanese. It was doujinshi.
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I mean, it like literally is just another great example of how good the localization is in the show. Not only just the Crystal Pepsi thing, but also like all of their use of like this weird sort of like almost punk rock language at times. But yeah, his friend is like, "Oh yeah, it's at this store that still sells Crystal Pepsi," and he says, the ones Van Halen did those Right Now commercials for, which is such a specific reference to like early '90s American pop culture.
That was a dated reference then.
Yeah, and it's so perfect because it's supposed to be dated. Cheerio in Japan is this like old, completely defunct drink by now, and it's like all the more hilarious to me is that like Cheerio is being displayed and drank multiple times, and yet they just are continuously referencing it as Crystal Pepsi, and I fucking love that because it's just like, well,
incredibly
nobody's gonna know the difference if you don't know what Cheerio looks like, but since we've done the research on it, it's just like this hilarious kind of like cognitive dissonance.
Okay, here we go.
That hat.
Yeah. You finally ditched school too, Takun, just like me. Meow.
There's a really great scene after Naota's done with school and he's hanging out with Mamimi down by the river like they always do, and she's wearing that cat ear hat. She's got the whiskers painted on. It's just like, it's more weird, inexplained costume changes that are just done to fit the visual theme of the show that I really like.
We can do that.
Yeah, it can totally get away with it because obviously everything about the show is about being just like
pretty punk.
Yeah, well, like punk and also like completely incomprehensible, which I totally love. But there's a really great scene at the beginning there where the whole like dialogue and music is playing in the background, but the whole scene is told through just the pictures that she's taking. I really like that direction a lot. It's a really great example of what is clearly like a corner cutting thing.
Oh yeah,
that they did not need to make so creative. And
it's a corner cutting thing, but it's also a big deal in anime when you have an exposition dump. How do you make it visually interesting? You have good ways to do that, like this, and like there's other good examples, like the manga part in episode 1. You have bad examples like Tokyomi walking in a circle with a wine glass for 10 minutes. Like there's good and bad. This is very good. Sometimes it's still a visual medium, and you gotta make it visually interesting.
And then after that, we have this really interesting sort of like intimate little scene between Naota and Eri, where she basically has run away from her house because it's like mobbed by reporters, and she hates her parents. And he like runs up on her, and he's like I think the only time in the show finds her at a position of disadvantage, just that she's just like out wandering the street, and he's just like, the student council president roaming around town like a delinquent or something like that. And soon after that, he's like, "Oh, I'm meeting my housekeeper," and then Haruko shows up, and it is maybe the entrance of hers that I laughed hardest at, because she's driving her Vespa at them, and of course all the cars behind her immediately just start like tumbling end over end and exploding. But the best part of the scene is this just a really great visual comedy of her just like looking back and just being like, what the fuck? Like she doesn't even know what she's doing. She doesn't even know why any of this shit is happening, and I love that.
I love the loudspeaker because she falls over, like she falls off the Vespa, and there's the megaphone that she has quite a few times to show, but she's talking and her lips are like through the megaphone doing the thing.
That's some like fucking
like I said, this episode is super cartoony.
Yeah, that's some
a
like
Tom and Jerry joke.
Yeah, Hanna-Barbera shit. Like more insanely needless 3D animation.
Yeah,
like
we have the
circling,
circle camera again.
Even crazier than last time, which is like 50 circles around.
Like zoomed in and just.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but I love
really
it. It's great. And then Naota, of course, spreading his inner horniness like a virus to Eri.
That becomes more and more of a thing.
Yeah, we get introduced to the concept of NO in episode 4, but you don't really need to know anything about it other than that it's horniness.
It's horniness. It's horniness and puberty, but mostly horniness.
But horniness is a part of puberty.
Definitely.
So after that, we move to Naota basically invites Eri to stay with him for the night because she's basically out of house and home by her own choice, but still out of house and home.
But Naota doesn't. His dad does.
Or his dad does. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. So we have another dinner table scene, which is another central thing in this show. And there is an incredibly good play on words of this that I've never noticed up until watching this. Naota's dad says, and I quote, he says, soda. How did you like the soda? Ninamori's daughter. I fucking laughed so hard.
I actually missed that one.
It is so easy to miss, but it's like another one of the examples of like what we were talking about in the last episode with like how good their use of Japanese is in the English dub, which is something you never hear.
Especially not in the same time you will hear a localization change reference Crystal Pepsi.
Yeah, well, it's totally...
It's incredible to strike that balance.
It's totally fitting with Fooly Cooley's theme of just like kind of not giving a fuck about like conventions and just doing whatever the hell you want. And clearly one of the things the localization team did that they wanted was, we're just going to have people say Japanese words
when
in
it makes
show.
sense when you got your yoishos, your
It's great.
soda.
It's great because it's not obtrusive. It's not. You
aren't
don't
missing anything if you don't pick it up, but it definitely adds a lot to the experience.
But that is the number one for me now. That is fucking hilarious.
I'll have to listen closer for 5 and 6.
It's really, really, really good. Ninamori in this scene also, the scene doesn't really serve much of a purpose other than to kind of introduce again the idea of like spicy foods being like these two middle episodes kind of introduce this idea of like spicy foods very much being similar to the sour drink from the first episode of just like, hey, you're a grown up once you start liking spicy foods. Yeah,
being an adult.
And of course, Ninamori is very clearly going through this sort of same quest for adulthood that Naota is, only she's kind of succeeding.
She's very similar to him in like at least wanting to appear adult.
Yeah, although
that's a big theme.
But she's way better.
Oh yeah.
She's
got a couple hang-ups, but she's doing better.
She's scarfing that curry. And then after that, we see Eri taking a bath, and it is revealed that she paid off Naota's dad to reveal that her father was sleeping with the secretary in his zine. He's like kind of outside the window talking to her like across the thing, and she basically just has dialogue with him where she's just like, I paid you off to do this whole thing, and you did a good job and all this shit. Never once caught that in any of my rewatches. It just completely slipped me by because it's one of those scenes that's really easy to miss. It goes by in a snap. Completely missed it. Yeah, it's crazy. And obviously it's then revealed that she rigged the votes in the play so her and Naota could kiss, I guess.
Yeah, she's totally got a crush on him.
Yeah.
It's horniness. When she says that, she also like very obviously places her hand on the bed.
Yeah. Yeah, basically the point of those two scenes is to reveal that Eri is both conniving and untrustworthy. And there's a really great Haruko moment towards the end of that scene in the bedroom where she's very clearly sort of protecting Naota by pissing off Ninamori. She's like kind of fondling his ears and like staring straight down at her, basically like wordlessly saying like, I know what you're up to, like you better not fuck with him. Which is one of the only times in the show that I think Haruko actually lets on that she I'm gonna say gives a shit about Naota. I don't think that she has...
more than the mission. It's the first time you can really tell she actually kind of cares.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's got this weird ass alien mission thing she's doing.
Yeah, she cares at a very base level, but she cares, which is more than she usually does.
So that's a big admission.
Yeah, it is, and it's an important moment for her and Naota, I think, developing their relationship. But yeah, Ninamori is a total. She's a total. I love her a lot. She's a fantastic character, and I think that I always liked her, and I always liked her character design, especially is very good and simple.
It looks like the new characters.
Yeah, it does. But like I'd never given her enough credit in terms of the writing put into her character is
I'm excited to see her come back in episode
stellar.
6 because I do vaguely remember that, well, not closure. We do get to see more of her.
Everybody has their moments in episode 6 for sure. And then, here we go with another incredible fight scene. Basically, Naota and Eri the next day get in an argument in school that escalates to the point where he admits to everyone in the class that she cheated to get the lead role. And then an angel...
Showed off the ears.
Yeah.
She rips his hat off, yeah.
Yep, and then an angel comes out of her.
Yeah.
And it turns into a weird parody of Evangelion in a lot of ways.
I did like that this showed that Naota's not the only one with the Eno stuff going on. Granted, he definitely kicked hers off because it's they touch
literally
heads.
Touch heads and you see it transfer.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
So this is more of a kaiju fight than a mecha one in a lot of ways. I don't know who did the design on this monster, but I think it is one of the best, if not the best.
There's a lot of Senko roll, especially in the way it moves.
Really amazing looking, and it is completely like it's doing a really good job.
Bionic instead of mechanical.
Well, it is. I mean, it literally like gets hit and bleeds, but I think more so than that, it really does this cool thing of not only conveying like, yes, that this episode is different thematically and visually than the other two episodes, but also just like that, like the whole thing with NO is that just like fucking anything can come through there, like guitars, robots, kaiju, and like the first two robots definitely look pretty similar. In fact, like I wouldn't be surprised if the first arm from the first episode was just the arm off of the robot that comes out in the second episode or whatever. But then this just completely batshit thing that doesn't look like the design aesthetic of anything else in that show comes out. And not only does it come out, it like turns Eri into like this weird kaiju zombie thing. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. So
it also at least to me seems like the first time one of the things that came out of them like was like almost acting in their interest. Like Eri was acting out at this point. The other times like when Naota's robots show up, they're just kind of like wanton destruction. They're
wanton destruction and very much against his wishes because he's usually just like thrown around by them, including in this scene. Like it's like literally the one theme of this show is that up until the 6th episode, he is just like unwillingly taken along on the adventure. And then so starts my favorite thing that is a very long Gainax and then trigger tradition of scoring at least one action scene with a existing classical music piece. This time, it's called Comedian's Gallop by Kavlevsky. It was written for a play in the 1920s, I want to believe. It's a pretty obscure piece, but it is perfect for this scene.
I've heard it in anime more than once. A lot of animators like to use it for reels. Actually, if you ever go like super Sakuga nerd and you look at art students, I can think of 5 off the top of my head that use Comedian's Gallop. And honestly, it might be because of the scene.
I'm pretty sure it's probably because of the scene because
it's a really really good like chase scene music.
It is one of the best scenes from the show. Period. Like it is incredible. It's very striking looking. It's very different from the fight scenes in the first 2 episodes. It's honestly very different than any fight scene in the show, simply because you have this really shockingly bright blue sky with the sun beaming down on it. The way it's animated is a lot different than most of the rest of the show. And yeah, it's just a big contrast to like what we've seen so far, which is very dark and colorful in its own way, but not like this. This is like almost too colorful for the time period of anime that it's from, which is usually very like gray and brown. And then towards the end, when Kanti like comes out of the floor and punches it, we have a famed Shinya Ohira cut with the thing kind of bleeding out and spitting out Ninamori. It's very fluid and weird looking, and
that's Ohira for you.
There's a lot of cuts in this episode specifically that sort of, even if they aren't by Ohira, sort of evoke that style, that him and, like sort of like Masaki Yuasa-esque kind of like very fluid, weird.
So it's the thin edges that just kind of, they're wobbly almost.
Yeah, and it's, it's more of Gainax very clearly experimenting with digital animation and that sort of thing, making it a lot easier to like troubleshoot those type of cuts, I think. But the scene also has some really good destruction and smoke effects as well, especially when Kanti at the very end shoots the cannon and you see the round like flying around, and then it kind of like buzzes the top of the building and it just kind of explodes out like a banana peel. That shit looked awesome. And then the end of the episode is them actually delivering the play, and we find the cherry on top of the Ninamori is a conniving little mistress. Her glasses that she introduced earlier in the episode are fake. Yeah, she
it's
like
the most brilliant Ninamori thing.
Yeah, it's totally inessential to the plot of the episode, past just like further characterizing Ninamori as this sort of like
did that well.
Almost like backstabbing character.
Yeah, like a puppet master type deal.
Totally.
She was definitely manipulating him with those, because like somebody, you're able to learn a secret about somebody, which is that she wears contacts, and then at the end be like, guess what?
Yeah.
That secret was completely fake.
Yeah. Moral of the story.
Fuck Ninamori.
Don't trust Ninamori.
Exactly.
So with episode 4, we're going to the ball game. It's called Full Swing. This is another Masahiko Otsuka joint. So in the episode preview for this episode, from episode 3, I don't think this is the preview from the Japanese version, but in the English preview from episode 3 for this episode, there is a story that Haruko tells about Ichiro Suzuki, the very famous baseball player who just
all
retired.
All of our listeners know who Ichiro is.
I mean, if you don't,
then fix it.
Yeah,
because
come on.
Honestly, he's incredible.
It's fucking Ichiro. But
anyway,
there's a story about Ichiro coming to America to meet Tommy Lasorda, and Tommy Lasorda says that if he wants to play in the MLB, he needs to get bigger arms. And I thought that was really poetic, considering that Ichiro just retired like one of the greatest baseball players the MLB has ever seen. So in this episode, Haruko joins of course, in classic Haruko fashion, she joins the opposition baseball team in their like town's league, and scores 44 straight runs, making the score 44-0. Brief aside, I just want to say that Haruko in her baseball uniform is still one of the hottest things on the face of the planet.
It is good, capital G.
Incredibly good. We have the famous quote very early on in this episode, "Nothing happens till you swing the bat," which is actually the quote that Adult Swim used to promote their announcement that they were making a second Fully Cooley.
It's amazing how you can have something so crazy and zany and all over the place as Fully Cooley and still manage to sum it up in a sentence.
Nothing can happen till you swing the bat. And that's kind of what this whole episode is about, is sort of Naota's fear of committing to stuff, doing something out of his comfort zone.
Even when it's literally flying at him.
Yep.
He's gotta do it.
There's a really great subtle moment here where Haruko looks like she's rearing up to hit Naota in the face with her base again, and he bitches at her and she walks away, and Naota almost immediately looks up and realizes that she's not paying attention to him anymore and just starts running after her. It's this like awful sort of kid almost like masochistic relationship that they've
12.
Yeah. But he's very clearly crushing very hard on her at this point.
This is a big episode of change for Naota. Lot happens.
It's the beginning of him starting to realize that I think he has a long way to go, but also that he's beginning the maturation process. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily into an adult, but into a kid who actually fucking understands his place in a lot of ways. There's a disgusting scene with Haruko and Naota's dad once they get back to his house, where he's rubbing his stubble on her.
Electrifying.
It is gross.
Yeah. No, they call it
But
like
it's-
electric massage or something.
Yeah,
dumb.
it's gross. It's hilarious, but it's also gross. But you can really tell that the whole purpose of her doing this is just to get a rise out of Naota. Like she's toying with him at this point. As to whether her intentions there, I don't know. Is it just playful teasing? Is it something more serious? Does it belie feelings?
I think
don't
this
know.
entire episode is her doing everything she can to goad him into taking action.
Yes.
I think this, while
That is a very good point.
normally teasing is kind of her MO, I think this was actually teasing with a damn good purpose.
That is,
Or at least with a hardcore purpose, which is more than normal.
that is an incredibly good point. And then I had gotten so much tunnel vision while watching this series that I had completely forgotten that this is the episode where Commander Amuro shows up, also known as Eyebrows. Yeah, his appearance just completely. I was just whoa, that guy's
Yeah,
here.
this is. I mean, we're past the halfway point, and we
Yeah.
get kind of the other half of the show. We get the. We get to know that Haruko is actually alien.
She is an alien.
She is an alien. It kind of.
We'll get there because
Yeah.
there's a big lore dump scene later
yeah.
on in the episode. But he he shows up immediately. He's just a huge douchebag. He's such a dick. He shows up on his own Vespa, which is clearly drawing parallels, but it's like a shitty old white Vespa. So you could see that they're basically saying like, oh yeah, here's like a shitty knockoff that nobody's going to like. He has a quote that says, older women can have a very strong effect, a very painful effect. And this is the one piece of advice I wish I had taken from this show because I definitely identify.
It's not too late.
I definitely identify with Naota on the whole like crushing on like people
gonna
who are
happen.
older and more mysterious than you.
Yeah.
This show is a very important lesson to all you youngins out there, and I hope you follow it.
They won't.
Don't get hit in the head with a base by a crazy older lady. Yeah, and then there's this episode starts to show its true colors a little bit in that it is very much taking some thriller and horror aspects of Evangelion and putting them into the show, especially some
fresh off it, yeah.
some directorial techniques are very similar, like the almost like subliminal messages of like weird like decapitated heads and stuff happening.
Yeah, that kind of I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And when it showed, I actually like involuntarily shuddered. I was like,
Yeah,
whoa.
I was like, whoa, yeah. And it's it's very similar to how they evoke that sort of stuff in Evangelion, sort of like stuff like flying at the camera really quickly that you can like barely process before seeing it. But yeah, that's just like right after that scene is sort of just a little taste of like the fucking wild shit that happens towards the end of this episode.
Yeah, that's the right stance. But you have to swing the bat. Oh! Hit it into the sky, don't hold back. Before he swings the bat, a real slugger imagines an arc inside his heart, arching directly to heaven.
Haruko then becomes Naota's batting coach. They have that really awesome scene in the little backyard area where she teaches him how to swing.
Yeah.
And sort of like envelops him. And
It actually reminded me of Happy Gilmore.
I mean, yeah.
Well, the scene with Chubbs like going around the back of the waist. Yeah.
It's a little
It's
better.
all in the hips.
It's a little more sentimental than that.
All in the hips,
but
Happy.
yeah, just give it a tap. Tappity tap tap.
tap.
Tap
Yeah.
it.
Naota would like to.
Haruko has a really great quote here where she says, a real slugger imagines an arc inside his heart reaching directly to heaven. That's a
Yeah,
great
she
scene.
Points out. I
Yep.
did like how like she has this amazing like line about that, and then Naota's just like it's kind of blinking a bit though.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't ignore.
She says nothing, but then that's a whole like that's an entire excuse for them to then move on to the next scene, which is the first scene in like the sort of command center that's on the outskirts of Mabase. And that is also the first appearance of Amuro's subordinate, whose name I didn't write down because it
doesn't matter.
goes by really fast. But her character design is literally just Lauk from Die Buster. Like that design was literally just lifted from Full Equally and made one of the main characters in Kazuya Tsurumaki's next series directorial
Buster,
effort after Full Equally, which is of course Die Buster or
Die Buster.
Gunbuster 2. So yeah, Amuro is kind of the other side of Naota's coin in that he's an adult who's basically faking being an adult. He doesn't like spicy bread, and therefore in Naota's eyes, he's a dumb adult who has no justification for being old. There's more double entendre with Haruko and Naota's dad late at night in his room. They're doing some weird shit in there that might be fucking, might be something else. Actually, I think it's revealed later that she is doing all of that to basically try to bring something out of either Naota's head or his head.
Yeah.
And this next scene actually gives some context to that. So sort of Naota returns home, and this is a scene that I definitely do not remember.
It's a
and
weird one.
Definitely,
even for Likoi.
It takes a lot of research and mental gymnastics to understand what's going on. But basically, here's what happens. So the previous night when Naota sees whatever's going on with Haruko and his dad, there's a very brief moment where you can see the Eno coming out of his head, and it is revealed that he spawned a robot from his head, which then impersonates his father and knocks his real dad out with a clock, who Naota then finds laying on the floor when he comes home. He then finds the robot malfunctioning and hits the TV, thus stunning the robot, and then the scene cuts to this weird scene between him and Amuro, basically getting interrogated.
Yeah, it's sort of it didn't feel like a police interrogation. It was more like Amuro being like, "Hey, buddy, I'm on your side. I understand."
He's trying to win Naota over, literally by sugaring up his drink. But we get a huge dump of lore here. Basically, that Haruko is an alien. She's from this mysterious organization called the Space Police Brotherhood, who in some way is related to this crazy entity that keeps inhabiting Conti named Pirate Lord Atomisk, who we don't actually see physically until the last episode. And even then, it's not really much of a...
No.
Yeah.
It's not the point.
No. He also does a lot to try to characterize Haruko as this sort of drifting delinquent nuisance, and Naota as just her latest victim. Which is definitely a way to see it, I think. And then, he finally introduces the concept of NO. I can't remember what NO actually stands for, but it's essentially a method of interdimensional channeling. It's using somebody's brain as a actual tunnel between dimensions to bring stuff through. And I think he says even from possibly light years away. So all the shit coming out of Naota's head, who the fuck knows where it's all from, but it's all from not Earth. So after that interrogation, we move back to the scene. I think it's assumed that the interrogation is taking place sometime before Naota actually got home. And Naota finds his father's corpse in a cabinet and then reawakens it with hot water. Also, Mamimi's off somewhere doing this weird cerebral incantation to another dark god while she's sitting on top of Kanchi's shoulders on a radio tower. No clue what is happening there. I think she's just this weird, almost she's in this episode, almost this weird, hermit observer, just kind of is there to provide more strangeness. And then Haruko bursts through the door in her on her Vespa and destroys the dad robot, revealing it to be a high-tech mannequin of sorts that Naota pulled through his head. And then, so this scene, takes place after the interrogation, and Naota is obviously suspicious, having heard all of this stuff. And he says, who the hell are you really? And she has this really great quote where she says, "I am an illusion of your youth, a manifestation of the feelings in your adolescent heart." She ain't wrong.
I love that so much. Like I said, she ain't wrong, but for a show that's so obtuse, she literally just hey, here's the symbolism.
And it's also she delivers that line with total irreverence.
Yeah,
and
that's how it is.
It is completely... it is another almost this sort of meta fourth wall breaking moment where she is acknowledging her what she is written as. She's basically saying great. This is what they wrote me as. Yeah. But
it's one of the few full clues we get at maybe what the show's talking about.
Yeah.
Just hold still. Hey, I didn't know boys felt like this inside.
Don't touch me there from behind.
Easy. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and pop it!
If I rush, it won't pop. Go slow. What's that?
You're back.
And then the final scene begins, and this final scene, Patrick, I think is not only one of the best episodes or one of the best sequences in the show, I think it might be one of the best sequences in anything ever.
It's way up there.
I have never had a scene that I have so clearly seen like hundreds of times before give me such powerful frisson.
Yeah,
as this scene.
I got a couple of them. I definitely see where you're coming from. It's it's kind of, you can't call it the climax of the show because what happens in 6, but like it's a climax of the first 4 for sure. It really ties everything together.
It is a pivotal moment for Naota's character, but also it is a pivotal moment for this show doing stuff that you as the viewer are not set up to expect, because this entire sequence is completely unlike anything that we've seen in this show before. It's Gainax is so good at building tension during these very specific scenes where like entire areas are evacuated in head of impending doom, and we see people who are remaining there like fighting to survive. It happens in this. Obviously, it's a huge part of Evangelion, that whole sort of like feeling of impending doom. Die Buster, the last episode, has like this really great scene like where the entire Earth has been evacuated, and we see like everybody just preparing for like just total destruction. Like Gainax has this weird love of like pre-disaster.
If it ain't broke.
And this scene is so fantastic because like there's a storm brewing and the wind is blowing, and the only people left in Mabase are like the main characters basically, and even Amurao is just like, if this thing goes off, like this evacuation will be for naught. Everybody will die. So he literally turns around and he like lowers his glasses and he's just like, so I'm asking you to tell her to hit one more out of the park, which is such a great line.
Yeah, this episode is so full of them.
It's so fucking good, this episode. It honestly might be, like, in terms of just, like, story and character stuff, it might be my favorite, my new favorite. Because episode 5 has always been my favorite, just because, like, it is definitely Imaishi's episode in a lot of ways. But this episode is just so...
It's all the notes.
It's so Gainax in such a different way than any other episode of the show is, and I fucking love it. Anyway, so there's more sex jokes. There's
great segue.
There's more yoi show, and then we have some absolutely incredible animation as the satellite starts disintegrating, where basically they like initiate the like purge procedure or whatever, and you see all of it like sort of like very fluidly breaking off. It's, oh man, there's something about just a bunch of debris falling away in space that looks so fucking cool when it's well animated. And then the satellite like rocket, I guess, literally just turns into a giant glove that then throws a ball. And the ball is the bomb, and it's a huge ball, but it literally, the animation is it opens up, turns end over end, and throws it like a baseball. It's fucking amazing. The song Crazy Sunshine is playing in the background of the scene, and I think that might be one of, if not the most underrated song in this show. And
is this the only time it shows up in the show?
No, it's definitely played more than once in the show, but it is played start to finish in the scene, and it's the full length version, and it's just a really perfect song for the scene. And now, like, after having watched it over the past couple days, A, I can't get it out of my head, and B, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to separate it from that moment of the bomb coming down.
That's okay.
Just the very specific mood.
That is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's a great thing, because this is, I think, like, again, one of the best scenes in the show. So yeah, and then Naota swings the bat, and the bat is another guitar. It basically Haruko allows Naota to pull she pulls another guitar out of his head, hands it to him, and is like, "You got to swing the bat, buddy." Yeah. And like, she literally
falls over backwards.
She's riding the Vespa off the Medical Mechanica building, and he swings the bat, and it's a huge moment in the show. And then she comes and basically helps him knock it out of the park. And we have a very Evangelion moment of the bomb flying away, and then the sky just going and turning blue again.
How the ball, you said before the glove thing, it's literally like a baseball.
It is a baseball.
It is a baseball.
It is a baseball. Yeah.
He did have this wonderful line as that ended. It was so good. Even I wrote it down. I don't have a lot of notes. It says, "I wonder if Haruko feels like this all the time." Which,
Yeah.
because this episode was like such a big like changing point, that really, really spells it out. You know, he's thinking maybe I don't have to be like this. Maybe I can be more like her. And you know, going back to her earlier quote about what she is, you know, like the flights of childish fantasy. Or she didn't say that, but you know, that general idea. Like maybe I can afford to be more of that.
She's a manifestation of like his youthful feelings.
There we go.
It's
a really good, impactful line.
This is a fucking great episode, and it is totally different than any other episode of the show. Probably more than just tonally and directorially. It's so out there and strange, and it's so cerebral at times, which is not at all what I would associate a word that I would associate with Fully Cooley. And it is also, definitely, again, the episode most inspired directorially and visually by Evangelion. I mean, there's just so many clear parallels there. It's just obvious. Like it's not even trying not to be like Eva, and I think that's hilarious considering how much shit they talk about it in the rest of this show. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us, guys, for Fully Cooley Rewind episode 2. Same time and place next week will be the final episode, episode 3, where we'll be covering episodes 5 and 6 of Fully Cooley. And then there's only one thing to do after that. See the first episode of Fully Cooley 2.
So fucking ready.
We are just
right
about
there.
2 weeks out from it now, and it is crazy to think about.
It's coming.
It is certainly coming, but we are going. Until next time, bye.
See ya.
He's calling me.